if you're spending your days doing that kind of writing, I would look for other work. I mean, or prepared to get paid less, because a lot of what you're doing can be automated.
Hi, everybody. This is Josh Becerra from Agurian. Welcome to our next episode of How I Work. I am delighted to be joined by Sara Rosinsky, who is an independent copywriter who works under the banner of Shiny Red Copy. She likes to describe herself as a logophile. Hope I said that right, which is a fun way to say she's a word lover. Sarah's written a book called Unflubbify Your Writing, Bite-Sized Lessons to Improve Your Spelling, Punctuation, and Grammar, an entertaining way to learn to navigate the trickiest parts of our language. Sarah's goal is to help people become more confident with writing so they can enjoy it the way she does. Thanks for being here, Sara.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
Yeah, it's so awesome. I'm someone who will be the first to say my spelling, grammar, and punctuation probably isn't great. And my mom was a editor at a newspaper, so she's always cringes when she sees my first drafts. So anyway, I'm super excited to talk with you today. Content writing, copywriting is kind of been around and in the news a little bit. So we'll get into that. I'm alluding to Chat GPT, but before we kind of move into topics of the day, why don't you start by why don't I have you tell us a little bit about your background, the passion for the written word, and how you got where you are today?
All right. Well, I got my first job in the advertising business more than 30 years ago. And beautifully, the way I got my job was by advertising.
There you
I
go.
had graduated from college during a recession, and I created a poster that basically said I was available to do whatever kind of work people needed. I hung it up all over Boston's Back Bay, had the little tear off phone numbers to my landline, whatever. Anyway,
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
I one thing led to another. I ended up getting a job in an advertising agency, and I just loved it. And because it was a small advertising agency, I got to see how the entire business works.
hmm
Um, Everything from media buying to graphic design, pitching work, account management, and of course, copywriting. And my boss was kind enough to really take me under his wing and taught me the trade. So I've worked in that ad agency. I worked in-house at Publix Supermarkets, which is headquartered in Florida. And
hmm
then I've become an independent copywriter. And like you mentioned, I've also become an author. I wrote a
Yeah.
book. So,
And what is it about the written word that just like inspires you?
well, first of all, every single word you and I use has a history. And I find that infinitely fascinating. It's sort of like a museum that travels around with you.
Yeah.
I'm not even exaggerating. Every single word had a beginning. It was probably changed by use in the same way that you would see floorboards in an old house get, a divot in them. You can see how human use has changed our language, and it's just so interesting. And I highly recommend people check out the website etymonline.com. That's ETYM as in etymology.
Okay.
Just, it's so interesting. Um, yeah.
I think it's really cool that like we continue to evolve our language, right? It's not something that's at all
Right.
static. And
Never.
as our kind of understanding of things evolves, we have to like give it names and,
Hmm.
develop language around it. So anyway, um, I think words are very cool and they were driven into my head by my mom, the
Hmm.
editor, for a long, long time. So I'm kind of blessed, I guess, with that. although my spelling is pretty cringeworthy. Um,
Well,
so
you have lots of tools to use these days, right? It's never
that's
been
right.
easier to look things up or to have
Yep.
them corrected on the fly.
Yeah. No, it is. It's definitely I use all of those tools.
Sure.
So you've done a lot of speaking on the topic of copywriting. As part of that, you share best practices, advice on how to be a copywriter. I know you have your top 10 kind of
Hmm.
things on how to be a copywriter. So why don't you share some of those things with the audience as well?
All right, I had to make a list of these so I would remember all 10 of them.
Yeah, that's a
Um,
lot.
typically I'd have an hour to elaborate on all of these, but I will try to share these efficiently. The first thing I tell everyone is to begin with clarity. You need to know exactly what you're trying to say. That sounds fundamental, but particularly if you're a small business owner and you don't know where to start, well, start with figuring out the one thing you want to get across. And
Yeah.
that's easier said than done, frankly. Once that's done, I recommend that people keep their writing reader focused. A lot of businesses make the mistake of talking about our facility and our
Mhm.
cajillion years of experience and our whatever. Your
Yeah.
reader uh, biologically cares about your reader. And
Yeah.
that's not a deficit. They're not selfish. It's just the way people are. And so you need to really think about and really use the word you, frankly. Really look
Hmm.
at a balance between how many times you say you and how many times you say us or me or I. That's really important. And I substantiate this when I speak, but we're flying along.
Yeah,
The
yeah. No,
third
but
thing,
I do love it. I think you're so right. So let's go with the third thing.
okay, the third thing is make your writing active, which I begin by explaining what the passive voice is. And that's best explained by saying, uh, why was the road crossed by the chicken?
Yeah,
Instead
no.
of,
Nobody
you're right.
wants to hear that.
So almost always it's a shortcoming if you're doing that, but not always. And I do want to clarify that there is a time to use the passive voice, but most of the time try to be active, try to um, choose verbs that are interesting, maybe unusual, and just active, pack a
Yeah.
punch.
Yeah.
Okay, number four. This may seem counterintuitive in the world of advertising, but I say make your writing honest. And that is such a good piece of advice. I'm just telling you, you will have, even if you're like Avis, back in the 60s, I guess it was, who said, we're not number one, we're the second most popular car rental company, but they
Yeah.
owned it. And they said, because of that, we're always going to try harder. And so just be as honest as possible, and then you can lean into it, you can own it, and you
Yeah.
don't have to tie yourself into a knot to lie, which is
Yeah.
morally not a good idea, but also
Well, I
just for
just think
efficacy.
authenticity is something that, yeah, like people can perceive, right? Like we just understand that. So anyway,
Absolutely.
I'll
Okay.
stop interrupting. Keep going.
Oh no, please, no. I don't want to talk a blue streak here. So number five, I have make your writing musical, and
Mm.
there I talk about how much I pay attention to the sounds of words. There are things you can do, practices like alliteration, where the beginnings of your words begin with the same sound. There's assonance, where the vowels in the middle echo one another, and rhythm, which all of these can really contribute to a level of musicality, get your writing noticed and remembered. I pay a lot of attention to that. So I
Yeah, I
recommend
love
other
it.
people do too. Yeah. And when in doubt, make your sentences shorter rather than longer. In terms of rhythm, you're just much better off going da 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 than you are having a 3-line sentence.
Yep.
Then I say number six, make your writing efficient, and that uh, is the use of headlines and subheads and Bullet points, frankly, your reader is a busy person, and the chances that that person is going to begin with the first word and carry all the way through to the last
Mhm.
word are they are close to nil. Your reader
Yeah,
is going to want to scan to get the gist, and then they can go back to revisit parts that are most important. So I highly recommend thinking about that.
that's
Then
such
number
great
seven.
advice. I mean,
Oh,
that
yeah.
it's such great advice because, like, I firmly believe people don't like read the way they used to, right? It is way more of a like scan and then find where I want to actually read. So we
Yeah.
spend a lot of time in our world, right, when we're looking at content and websites, is like, what's the H1? Where are we
Mm-hmm.
chopping? Where are we putting in like jump links so that people
Mm-hmm.
can scan a list of bullet points and then find the one that they're really most interested in, click on that, and jump to that piece of the document. So, uh, yeah, that's great advice.
Right. And it also ties in with what I said earlier about focusing on your reader. Just always put yourself in that person's shoes. And
Mhm.
again, they're not a bad or a selfish or a self-centered person. They're busy, and do them favors at every opportunity, and they will thank you for it. Number seven, I have make your writing fat free. And this is probably really, this should be my number one. It defines me. Remove every single word that is not necessary.
Mhm.
You can't believe how much we tend to insert redundancies in our writing. It's kind of human nature to repeat ourselves a little bit to make sure everyone got the point. Ain't
Yeah.
nobody got time for that. Just, I'm just brutal with my elimination of fluff and fat. And I highly recommend, and there are a million anecdotes about this.
Oh,
We
yeah.
don't have the time.
I,
We don't even have the
I
time.
can
I'm just
I can
telling you.
think about how I write myself, and yeah, a lot of times I'm just like running on just because I think I need to do that to sound more professional or something.
Sure.
But it's short, sweet.
Yep. Do that reader a favor. And I also, as I read, it's really like, it's almost like you're looking at yourself in the mirror and trying on an outfit, and you go, is it better with the earrings or without? Or you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
you have to try it both ways, and if it's better without, get rid of it. Be brutal.
Yeah.
I I will quote myself by saying, I always say, uh, if it doesn't help, it hurts.
Hmm.
So anything in your writing that's not contributing to getting your message across better, get rid of it. You'll be better off. So then I say, make your writing easy. And this is very related to that. But you mentioned just a second ago, there's a propensity to get a little wordy to sound professional.
Hmm.
We kind of feel like we have to cloak ourselves in jargon sometimes, or, establish that we know what we're talking about.
Yeah.
And I would dissuade everyone from doing that. If you've Your credentials your knowledge will speak for itself without trying to sound fancy.
Yeah.
It's never helpful. And I have a lot of samples of the most convoluted, verbose, difficult, impenetrable, here I am using redundancies, but I'm trying to establish, uh,
Yeah.
especially on LinkedIn. Sometimes you'll look at a resume and go, What are you saying? You're saying you
Yeah.
took out the trash, but it's taking you four sentences.
Right.
Anyway, then we're up to number nine, and this
Mhm.
says, make your writing spinach free. And by which I mean, check the spinach between your teeth. By which I mean, if you do not proofread carefully or have a colleague proofread your work, the best laid plans can go right down the chute.
Yeah.
And I share a number of really embarrassing errors that believe me, I've made too. I'm not better than anyone else. The
Right.
human brain does this nice favor for us where it sees what we meant to write and not what's
Mhm.
really there. So it's just extremely easy to make errors. And I will point out that the word public without an L is still a word. But
Yeah.
if you're writing about public accountants or whatever the case may be, you don't want that other word, and it's awful
No.
easy. And if you are writing about the word public a lot, I recommend doing a search for the other one just to make sure. Anyhow, that's the spinach
Use your
number.
tools. Use your tools.
Use those
I will
tools.
say, so my daughter participated in her high school play this year, and it was called the Spelling Bee. But anyway,
Ah,
they brought some parents up on stage to participate, and one of them was really kicking butt, and they needed the parent to get off the stage. So
uh-huh.
asked them to spell there, and they were like, uh, Their, and they're like, nope, it's
That's the
There.
other one.
Yeah. So they were able to get
Yes.
them off the stage, but the English language, provides us with these opportunities where, there and there. So anyway,
It's a good way
yeah.
to put it. Opportunities for,
Yeah.
oh boy. Yes, those are deadly. And then the last number 10 is make your writing confident. And that,
Mm.
of course, the point there is the more you know, the more confident you can be in your writing. It's pretty simple, right? I just would encourage everyone, it, if there's a rule that's always intimidated you or confused you, just take a minute to get a handle on it. And then you won't have that fear producing anxiety, right? About
Yeah.
messing up. I think we all are kind of insecure because there's so many opportunities to goof in our language, like you just said.
Yeah.
So just, keep learning. I certainly do. I look things up every day.
Well,
So,
I'll say every single one of those 10, I was thinking to myself, like, oh, I totally do this. Oh, I need to stop doing that. Or, oh, I need to start paying more attention to those things. So those are great tips and best practices for sure. I want to shift gears a little bit into kind of marketing. A lot of the
mhm.
audience of this podcast are marketers. So, we talk about brand standards and guides and things like that a lot. A lot of times it's involves color palettes, fonts, design standards, but you also get kind of the voice of the brand or like what the brand voice is. So can you talk a little bit about your ideas about like the importance of brand voice, how you make sure you don't stray from it, and maybe if you have an example of a company that like always gets their brand voice right, like you see it
Mhm.
every single time?
Sure. Well, as your marketing audience knows, branding is all about consistency, really,
Mm.
right? It's You know it when you see it because it's always the same. And
Yeah.
and also we know about voice because these days if a bot, for example, slides itself into your DMs or whatever the case may be, you can tell, oh, this
Mm.
isn't a person. There's something off about these words. I can tell there's something disingenuous or wrong. Or this isn't
Yeah.
really my Aunt Sally who's reaching out to me. I can tell.
Mhm.
So that's just evidence of our sense about voice and how much it really matters. Um, in terms of what brands do a good job of having a distinctive or consistent voice, most of them are pretty similar, I would say. Pepsi and Coke aren't going to sound a whole lot different. They're going to sound
Yeah.
confident and cool and, like your best friend and all of that stuff. Distinctive voices are unusual enough that they get your attention.
Mhm.
I've been pretty tickled with the brand Oatly,
Okay.
the oat, milk.
Milk, right? Yeah.
Yeah, how would I describe it? Kind of confidently self, not deprecating, self amused. I don't know. They're okay with. I remember a campaign they did about their newsletter, and they kind of they had they had what do you call it, out of home boards,
Mm.
encouraging people to sign up for an oat milk newsletter, which is
Right.
preposterous, right? Newsletters are things we do because we're not thinking straight. They
Yeah.
went the other direction. They acknowledged how annoying newsletters are, and they just leaned into it, to my point
And they put
earlier
it on
about
a
being
billboard.
honest. They put out billboards. It was just nuts. So, anyway, and when I see their typeface, which graphically is always consistent, I know it's going to
Mm.
be from them. I'm sort of giddy. What are they going to say? What is,
Yeah.
and they always get me. Um, so that's
I
just
I
one.
was listening to a video the other day, and this may be more just about brand in general, but I thought it was is pretty clever. And the person was saying, you know, if you think about Nike and I think it was uh, like Courtyard Hotels or something like that, right? It was like you think about Nike and you say, what would a hotel that Nike would
Mm-hmm.
build look and feel like and
Mm-hmm.
sound like? And like, we can kind of all imagine what that would
Mm-hmm.
probably look and feel, the color scheme and how people would be dressed and like what. And then on the flip side, it was, and if, could you imagine what like a Courtyard Inn and Suites tennis shoe would look like? No, you can't imagine, right? Because they don't like have that
Right.
full kind of brand that
Right.
we all are so familiar with. So anyway, I thought that
That's
was pretty
interesting.
clever to just like
Yeah,
think about it in that way. And I know it strays probably a little bit beyond just brand voice, but I thought that was kind of a clever thing that came out of a video I was watching.
absolutely.
So
Um,
another
yeah.
kind of marketing thing, topic that you and I discussed when prepping for this was around testing. Like we think about, hey, let's test these different messages to get like better click-through rates or engagement. What is your opinion on testing messaging and copy?
Certainly, something like an email subject line is a very quick way to learn what's getting more opens.
Hmm.
But I have a warning about that. Just opening an email is not necessarily the goal.
Yeah.
Um, Many years ago, the company I was working for thought they would give I guess it would be an AI solution, an AI subject line generator. They thought we'll give it a test. We'll try this thing
Yeah.
out. I, of course, lost my mind. I was, as a staff copywriter, I was like, you're doing what?
You're
But
turning
I'll
this
tell you
over to the
what.
machines?
Yeah, I know. I was really not a happy camper. Um, but here's the thing. That machine, that AI did create, subject lines that would test and get more opens. But when I, as a human being with a brain and a heart, read those subject lines, like we were just saying, I could clearly tell it was not created by this company's brand. Like it was
Yeah.
clearly, it felt salesy, it felt sensationalist, and this brand is quite the opposite. It's a family, it's a lifestyle, it's a empathetic brand, just all of these things. And I hated uh, what tested better. So the testing's something to pay attention to, but you got to keep your discernment also.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's right. I do think that there's that like our filters as humans are so well tuned to like understand what is like real and authentic and what is just kind of like, yeah, salesy, um,
Hmm.
those other things that you're saying. So I agree. we've seen a lot of success with like the types of testing, but I do think that the successes are built upon like that very kind of, yeah, human heart foundation. So that's a really good call out. So you mentioned AI, and this is kind of our
Mm-hmm.
last question today, and I can't like let you off the hook without asking you about Chat GPT and all the hype,
Mm.
because everybody's saying, oh, copywriters and content creators are going to be out of work, in no time. What are your thoughts on like the new AI tools and how they might impact copywriters, content in the future?
Almost anything I say will be parroting the things I've heard that seem most likely.
Hmm.
I No one has a crystal ball. No one
Yeah.
a lot of people are positioning themselves as authorities right now. This
Yeah.
is this is new, right? So I'm not going to use the word never, and I'm not going to say will or anything. At this point in our lives, I believe that the drudge type of writing, by which I mean blogs that are being written just to incorporate keywords to be found by machines, right?
Yeah.
Um, if you're spending your days doing that kind of writing, I would look for other work. I mean, or prepare to get paid less because a lot of what you're doing can be automated.
Yeah.
You know,
Or figure out how to be more. You'll just have to start using those tools to be ultra
exactly.
efficient.
That's my point. Right, right, right. But I think as more and more people do that, there will be a bit of a race to the bottom. Folks who can whip that out more quickly, that check all the boxes. I've got your keywords right here.
Yeah.
Um, hey, if you like doing that kind of work, I don't know. That's not what I do.
Yeah.
I'm that's not my idea of a good time is writing a composition for a robot that I don't know.
Yeah.
So, um,
Which means there's got to be room then for like the very creative kind of human side of writing, and
yeah,
that's never really going to be go away. That's what I'm interpreting.
I I think so. I This is such science fiction territory. I
Mm.
Because I'll speak about AI as a singular beast, whereas it's actually a number of different ones, but let's just call it the beast.
Yeah.
It's learning all the time. And so if it can hoover up every word I've ever written, perhaps it can become me. Yeah, I don't know. Um,
I
it's
love how you
anyone's
coined it
guess.
as like science fiction. Like it's
It is.
literally coming to life right now. And yeah. Um, and I think there's people who don't know like what level of control we're even going to have um, as it
Who
moves
knows?
forward. So that's
I'll tell you this
crazy.
much. I will, I will, I'm never going to fall in love with a robot, and I'm never going to make a robot my best friend. I mean, I think there are things that human beings are always going to offer one another.
Yeah,
I
I
don't
love
think we
that.
can be completely replaced. So it'll be interesting to see what we begin to value and seek out and um, lift up. I don't know.
I love
Uh,
all that. That's like a very kind of hopeful and inspirational message on which I think we could end. Um, which I just threw together some really long, crazy words on which I think we could end. Uh, but I just broke rule number 8. But hey, so I've really enjoyed this conversation, Sara. Thank you so much for being my guest, and we'll just say goodbye for this episode of How I Work. Thanks.
Thank you.